If a child had to choose between a golden promise and the hand that wipes his tears, which one would he reach for? The music died mid-note in the Montemayor Mansion's ballroom. Dozens of faces shifted toward the stage, where a man in a navy suit, immaculate, powerful, too tired to pretend, lifted a remote and faced a wall of glass and light. Behind him, 5 women in evening gowns arranged themselves with the practiced poise of someone who had never been told no in public. And at the back of the room, a little boy stood in a doorway, clutching a folded paper crane as if it were a life raft. "Before I announce my decision," said the man, Alejandro Montemayor, voice steady in a way that didn't match his eyes, "I want you to see the truth for yourselves." The screens flickered to life, but to understand how that moment came to pin an entire room with one breathless heartbeat, we have to step back to a morning that smelled like rain and furniture polish. At 8 o'clock, the crystal top of the living room table was already clear enough to double as a mirror. Maria Gonzalez wiped in slow circles with a damp cloth, her movements gentle, her grief disguised patience the only thing in the room you couldn't immediately price. She paused at the sound the rich know how to make heavy engines humming through a security gate and glanced toward the window. 5 black cars slipped onto the driveway like ink poured over marble. She didn't flinch. After 4 months in the Montemayor mansion, she had learned to carry herself as if people were always watching, even when they pretended not to see her. Upstairs, a father and son watched the same approach. One with a director's mind, the other with a child's bright curiosity. "Son," Alejandro said, pointing with the casualness of a man who never had to ask permission, "they're here." Diego, 8 years old and small for his age, pressed his forehead to the glass. On the lawn, 5 elegant silhouettes emerged one by one, heels confident on wet stone, hair sprayed into obedient perfection, smiles as glossy as their luggage. "So they'll live here for 30 days, Diego murmured. "And then I have to choose one to be my new mom, right?" Alejandro's hand hovered above his boy's shoulder, then settled there. "Exactly, they're educated, from good families. They can give you the world, mijo. And if I don't like any, you're going to like them," Alejandro said, with a certainty he was still trying on, like a new suit. "They'll teach you things, take you places. Some things you don't learn from going places. Some things you learn when the world comes crashing down around the puzzle you thought you had solved, like the sound of a 600 champagne flute shattering against tile. The crack rang through the house, a voice like a whip crack followed. "Are you stupid?" The words were almost a purr. "That glass was imported. You just broke a year of your own salary." Alejandro and Diego met eyes. "What was that, Papi?" "I don't know," Alejandro said. "Let's go." They found the scene in the living room. Maria on her knees, collecting shards with her fingers, a thin red line blooming where the glass had bitten her. A tall woman stood over her with her arms crossed in a patient, disgusted sigh. "That crystal cost more than she'll make in 12 months, the woman said to no one in particular, in the same tone you'd use to discuss a scratch on a car. "It was an accident," Maria whispered, eyes on the floor. The apology instinct lived deep in her. She had trained it to rise quickly and block larger storms from breaking. "Accidents," the woman scoffed, "happen to people who don't know how to handle nice things." "Excuse me," Alejandro said, stepping forward. "What's going on?" The woman turned, a perfect smile snapping into place. "Alejandro, I'm Rebecca Del Olmo, one of your guests. Your employee knocked my glass off the tray. It's fine." "I suppose." Behind her, 3 more women drifted into view, like expensive perfume following the first through the doorway. Victoria Rangel, all angles and poise, her social feed come to life. Regina Sandoval, neat and measured behind dark-rimmed glasses. Competence wrapped tight like a sash. Veronica Del Villar, all white coat and perfect hair. The sort of doctor whose waiting room comes with a branded water bottle. Leticia Esquivel, an architect with a portfolio that had never met a budget it couldn't shrug off. Introductions spilled like champagne. Pedigrees, diplomas, cities with stories that usually include the word summering. Not one pair of their eyes found the face of the woman cleaning up the floor where their heels would step. "Accidents happen," Alejandro said, trying to smooth the edges. "We'll replace whatever broke." They happen, Victoria replied tightly, when people don't know their place. Diego didn't look at the women. He ducked around his father and dropped to his knees beside Maria. Did you get hurt? Maria raised her eyes for the first time. There were tears in them she'd trained herself not to let fall. It's nothing, mi amor. Just a scratch. Mi amor, Rebecca repeated, and if the word had been a piece of fruit, she would have peeled off the soft part and threw it away. What a level of familiarity. Let's all take a breath, Alejandro said, trying again. We'll start properly. He announced what everyone already knew. Maria worked in the house. The 5 were candidates. The next 30 days would end in his decision. He made it sound clinical. On paper, it must have looked so reasonable. By afternoon, the 5 had turned the terrace into a strategy room. Gifts lay like bait on a bright table tablet glass still wrapped in velvet. Tickets to a destination childhood. Lists of private schools, appointments with pediatricians whose names sounded like password-protected medicine. Blueprints for a redesigned childhood bedroom and a palette that made every world look adult. Diego shuffled in, polite, rehearsed, a small actor hitting his mark. Diego, Rebecca sang, sweeping her arm like a game show model. Look what I brought you. His eyes lit up because he's 8 and screens glow. But then the light dimmed as quickly as it had come. He thanked her. He thanked them all. He answered questions like a prince receiving citizens, each word a polite brick between him and their glittering plans. And then Maria stepped out with a tray of juice and cinnamon cookies that tasted like after school. In her pocket, crisp packets of colored paper. Afternoon snack, she said in her simple way. Diego's face changed. The polite actor quit the stage. The real boy came bolting forward with a smile that happened all the way up to his eyes. Did you make the cinnamon ones? Yes, she laughed softly, showing him the paper. And I brought the colors you asked me for blue, red, yellow, all of them. He clapped, which was how joy left his body when he forgot to hide it. Can we make cranes after homework? And will you help me with math? Of course. Victoria cleared her throat in a way that tried to sound maternal and ended up sounding like a closing door. Diego Corazon, don't you think you should try more? Appropriate hobbies? Sports? Languages? I like origami, Diego said, simple as gravity. That night, after Diego fell asleep with a paper crane in one hand and a cinnamon sugar streak on his cheek, the 5 gathered in the living room as if they had been invited to declare policy. We need to talk, Rebecca said softly, because she understood that power is sometimes a whisper. Everyone knew what about, but they perform surprise because it's part of the dance. You saw the way he reacts when she enters, Regina said, tapping the end of a pen on her knee. It's not healthy. A child from his background needs boundaries. It blurs who's in charge, Victoria added, her voice the sound of furniture being moved into a more appropriate place. From a medical standpoint, Veronica said, tilting her head the way people do when they have good news to disguise bad news, it is not ideal. He needs role models with proper preparation. Exactly, Letitia murmured. This Maria behaves like family. It's, inappropriate. Rebecca stood at a window, the glass reflecting her perfect posture back at her. We are here to help Alejandro and his son, but we can't do that if an employee is confusing the order of things. She needs to learn her place. What are you suggesting? Veronica asked, though she already knew. A course correction, Rebecca said, the smallest smile on her mouth. Lessons, gentle ones. She will understand the difference between boss and staff, and she will stay in her lane. In the study, Alejandro stared at a spreadsheet without reading numbers. He'd been around power his whole life. He knew what it looked like when it dressed itself up as good manners. Still, the way the 5 had treated Maria had rubbed under his skin like grit. But there was also the other side, the part he couldn't stop replaying, the way Diego's entire posture loosened when Maria walked into a room. The way his son had begun to eat, play, laugh again since she'd arrived. When had he last heard that laugh before her? He knew the exact day he had stopped. 8 months ago, when grief had collapsed the house from the inside. Alejandro touched the paper crane sitting on his desk. Papi, can I come in? Diego asked from the doorway, already entering because the study wouldn't have stopped him anyway. Of course. Diego climbed into his lap with a seriousness that made him look older. Look what Mari taught me today. He unfolded and refolded the paper with care. A bird emerged, wings delicate and sure. It's beautiful, Alejandro said. She's patient with you, isn't she? When I mess up, she doesn't get mad, Diego said, tracing a wing. She just shows me again. Diego, Alejandro said, heart tugged from two sides. What do you think of the ladies? They're pretty, the boy said thoughtfully, and they brought cool things. He hesitated, then whispered what mattered. But Mari is better. Why? Because she's real. Out of the mouths of children. Alejandro felt his jaw tighten, the instinct to protect, the instinct to strategize, each making their case. Do you think I'll fire her? Diego asked, voice thin with fear. Why would I do that? I don't know, he said, placing the crane back down as if it could fly away. I just got scared. Alejandro gathered him close, the kind of hug he wished he had learned to give sooner. She's staying, he said, a promise that would soon be tested. I promise. The next morning, when Maria came downstairs with her hair pulled back and her heart braced, the five were already waiting like a jury. No one returned her greeting. Victoria tipped a sugar bowl onto the gleaming floor with a delicate flick. Oops, she said brightly. Could someone... What's your name again? It's Maria, Regina supplied, frowning as if the syllables were cheap plastic. Hard to remember the names of the help. Maria knelt, cloth in hand, and cleaned as if dignity were something you could polish back into yourself. Before she could finish, Veronica stumbled into a potted plant. Soil bled into the white carpet. Oh no, she said without looking sorry. What terrible luck. Diego came in seconds later, saw the mess, and asked what any child would ask. Why is there dirt on the floor? An accident, Rebecca said smoothly. Your employee is already dealing with it. Not an accident, Diego said, looking directly at Veronica. I saw you push it. Silence fell the way it does when people realize a child won't play along. Victoria's smile strained. You must have seen wrong, Carino. I didn't, Diego said quietly. You're being mean to Mari. Rebecca crouched to his height, her face careful. There are things you don't understand yet. We're just trying to make your house more organized. Organized how? Diego asked. Everyone in their proper place, Regina said. The employee handles cleaning. Educated people handle you. Maria handles me fine, Diego said, frowning. She doesn't have the preparation for that, Veronica said, the kind of sentence that feels like a paper cut. Maria set the cloth back in the bucket, stood, and forced a smile through a throat that ached. Come have breakfast, mi amor. But Diego stood his ground, his small body suddenly an anchor. I like Marie more than all of you. Pride shouldn't burn your eyes, but it did in hers. Shame shouldn't turn cheeks red, but it did in theirs. By the weekend, Alejandro had done what men do when they feel surrounded. He had gathered information. 2 new cameras watchful in the living room, a motion-activated recorder in the hallway. Lens angles he'd learned from men who protect men like him. He told no one. He simply watched. He watched Letitia slide cleaning supplies into a cabinet behind other cabinets. He watched Regina wipe a wet hand on a mirror and yell that it streaked. He watched Victoria tilt her cup and let coffee spill into the couch seam where stains like to hide. And then he watched Rebecca's voice curl like smoke around a threat. Maria, she called, and when Maria arrived, the marble floor looked like a modern art piece, paint splashed in a mockery of motion. What is this disaster? I didn't do that, Maria said, careful, wounded. Someone poured it. Careful with accusations, Rebecca snapped, turning a ring as if it could tighten her temper. An employee can be fired for insubordination. He watched Diego rush in like a firefighter with nothing but the truth. They did it, the boy said. They did it on purpose. Kin. He watched Regina block Maria from hugging his crying son. Let him cry, she said. It will teach him. And that was the moment Alejandro stopped watching. What is happening here? He asked from the doorway, a calm no one in the room had the right to trust. Thank goodness, Rebecca said instantly. Diego is confused. About what? He accused us of doing things to your employee. Alejandro looked at his son's wet face, then at Maria's shaking hands. He looked at the 5 women who had been taught by life that you can make a new truth if you can afford to repeat it enough times. "Is it true?" he asked. "Of course not," Regina said, outraged. "Children make things up." Alejandro knew who made things up. He also knew that watching would get him more than anger. It would get him leverage. That night, he told the 5, with a practiced neutrality, that everyone in his house would be treated with respect. He listened as they pivoted. "Respect goes both ways," Victoria said. "The help must know their place." Maria was interfering with Diego's education, Veronica added. "Attachment disorders," Regina warned, her voice adopting that special professional sympathy that never goes on sale. "Thank you for your input," Alejandro said. "I'll think about it." He did more than think. He made calls. Referrals spoke like a choir. Maria is honest. Maria is patient. Maria is diligent. Maria is the first to arrive. Maria is the last to leave. Maria returned the money I dropped. Maria caught my twins when they jumped off the castle they built on my couch. Maria asked for a day off to take her grandmother to the clinic and insisted on making up the time. A man like Alejandro knew when numbers were lying. He also knew when voices were telling him the whole truth. Then pseudo-concern began to fall out of the sky like hail. "Alejandro," his sister Claudia called, concern slip-sliding into accusation. "I heard you have problems. Something about an employee." Someone named Regina had whispered into someone named Regina's ear, who had whispered into his sister's. An hour later, it was a partner, with the distinct tone of someone rehearsing for the board. Investors are nervous. There are murmurs about questionable decisions. His eyebrows had only one place left to go. And then the knock came, a man with a briefcase and a bland tie, the kind of man who enters kitchens to deliver cowardice, dressed as paper. "Private investigator," he announced, producing a file thick with the kind of thickness fear requires. "Maria is not who she seems," he said. "There's a record." Alejandro paged through documents that didn't fit together, dates that overlapped with employment he had already verified, that ugly plastic smell of recent printer ink passing itself off as history. He had held enough contracts in his life to know a forged signature when it tried to fool him. He closed the file, handed it back, and smiled the kind of smile that ends negotiations. "Tell me," Alejandro said softly, "how much did they pay you to manufacture this?" The man blinked. "I don't know what you do," Alejandro said, the calm back, but different now. This was the calm of a man who had found his footing again. He tore the pages in half, and then in quarters, and then he opened the door. "Let your client know I prefer my lies better constructed." After he left, the house hummed with the kind of silence that says someone has been listening. The 5 huddled in the living room as if furniture could protect reputation. "What did he want?" Rebecca asked when Alejandro entered. "To trick me with forged papers," he said, dropping his gaze from one face to the next. "Which is a crime." "Alejandro," she replied, buying time. "You don't think we—" He didn't think. He knew. He connected the camera feed to the nearest screen and pressed play. Rebecca's face appeared first, sunlight on her hair, a phone at her ear. "Yes, I need a full file on Maria Gonzalez. Make up prior employment issues. How much?" "Great." Letitia's glass slipped in her hand. Victoria's hand found the back of a chair. Regina's throat worked. "I have everything," Alejandro said, suddenly colder than marble. "Every sabotage, every lie, every plan you rehearsed while my son watched." Rebecca's last attempt sounded almost bored. "We were protecting you and your boy." "Protecting?" Alejandro asked. "By teaching him which people deserve to be treated like furniture?" He could have ended it there. He could have called their cars and sent them away with a check for the inconvenience of being caught. But he was a man who understood the currency of a public gesture, and he had a plan. He approached Maria in the kitchen after everyone else had gone upstairs. His voice lowered, the weight in it the weight of apology. "I owe you one," he said. "For what, sir?" she asked out of habit, then remembered and corrected herself. "For what, Alejandro?" "For not protecting you sooner, for doubting what I could see every day." She shook her head, tears tracking lines she hadn't let form for weeks. "You believe me?" "I always did," he said. I just let noise get in the way. I would never hurt Diego, she whispered fiercely. I love him. I know. He loves you too. He turned the screen toward her. She watched it all, how they had taken turns smearing her name, how they had manufactured witnesses and recruited the neighborhood to their side. She watched herself, steady at the center of their storm, and finally she let herself imagine not simply surviving, but winning. What will you do? She asked. Expose them, he said, in front of everyone. But I need your help. What do you need me to do? Trust me, he said, and for the first time in a long time, someone asked Maria for something that would cost her dignity only temporarily. She nodded. She would bear 4 more days. Then she would see what justice tasted like. The performance began immediately. That night over dinner, Alejandro cleared his throat and said what the 5 most wanted to hear. I made calls. I found inconsistencies. What kind? Regina asked, trying not to smile. I won't discuss it in front of Diego, he said, glancing at his son. But you were right. What are you going to do? Victoria asked too quickly. I'll let her go after the final party. Diego's chair scraped. You can't fire Marie. Sometimes adults know what's best, Alejandro said, and he hated himself a little for the way his son's face crumpled. Maria stood at the doorway, nails biting into her palm, and played her part. I'll keep my distance, she said in a voice that shook like a held-back sob. The 5 exchanged gratified looks, each holding a mirror up to the other, each finding the same smile reflected back. Friday morning, Alejandro left for work and didn't really leave. In the study, he watched the living room where 5 women toasted their own storyline with champagne from his cellar. We did it, Rebecca laughed, clinking crystal. Finally. That one is out, Victoria said. The plan worked perfectly, Regina added. The fake investigator, the papers, the little PR. And the best part? Veronica chimed in, glowing. Alejandro thinks it's his own idea to fire her. Letitia giggled. Men are so easy to manage. Alejandro recorded every word. Then because he's a man who has always known how to apply pressure, he dialed the intercom and lowered his voice into something anonymous. Hello? Anyone home? He said, as if he were a reporter at the gate. I hear a housekeeper here is being fired for misconduct. Would any of you like to comment? They lit up like a switchboard. Send him in, Rebecca said into the intercom. We'd love to set the record straight. He hung up and left them to talk, the camera gathering their next ideas like a net gathers fish. If a real journalist comes, Regina said, we'll say she tried to seduce Alejandro. And that she manipulates the boy, Victoria added. We can say she stole, Veronica offered. Or that she mistreated him when his father wasn't around, Letitia completed. And for the first time, something like unease rippled in the room. Cruelty sounds uglier when you hear your own voice admitted out loud. Rebecca stared at her reflection in the dark TV screen and said what she had really meant all along. We'll invent so much that she'll never work for a rich family again. In the afternoon, a gossip article appeared online with a tone that vibrated between glee and moral outrage. Housekeeper seduces widower employer, uses orphan child as leverage. It took the 5 less than 4 minutes to forward it to everyone in their phones. It took Maria less than an hour to come home shaken. People were whispering about me, she told Alejandro in the hallway, her composure almost gone. Somebody crossed the street to avoid me. A paper on the gate called me a scammer. She clutched her hands together like a person trying to keep something contained. If I should go, no, he said gently. Can you endure a few more days? The truth is, courage is sometimes nothing more than the decision to stay one more day. I'll try, she said. He found Diego in his room, staring at the ceiling with the stiff posture of someone who is trying not to cry. Son, Alejandro said softly, I need you to trust me. Diego rolled to face him, mouthy line that didn't belong on an 8-year-old. Are you really going to fire her? There will be a party, Alejandro said, and it felt like confessing to a trick. People will say things you won't like, but at the end, everything will be okay. How do you know? Because I promise, Alejandro said, and promises are very heavy when they begin to matter. Sunday came like a drumbeat you had been hearing in the distance without realizing it. The mansion glittered. Flowers flared in arrangements fragile enough to be an apology you send to yourself. Family came, friends came, neighbors came, and a few journalists wandered in with their cameras at their hips, shapes of uncertain truth. The 5 women glided in like a debut, their dresses whispering secrets to the floor, their jewelry catching light as if light were a thing you could persuade to do tricks for you. "Today is ours," Rebecca whispered to the others. "One of us leaves with a ring. The other leaves with a story to tell." "Let's hope it isn't the maid's story," Regina muttered, half-laugh. By 4, everyone had a drink and a guess. Speculation hummed. The room held that particular impatience a party gets when it becomes an audience. Alejandro stepped onto the small stage, exhaled, and asked for attention. "Thank you for coming," he began pleasantly. "These 5 kind women have spent 30 days in our home. Today I'm meant to announce a choice." 5 smiles widened. 40 phones lifted. "But before I do that," Alejandro said, remote in hand, "I want to share what I discovered." Rebecca's smile didn't move, only froze somewhere between first position and flight. Victoria took a half step forward. "Maybe we should— This is part of my announcement," he said, and pressed a button. On the screen, Rebecca's recorded voice floated out over the music of the party. "Yes, I need a full file on Maria Gonzalez. Make up prior employment issues." "How much?" "Perfect," someone murmured. Someone else hissed, "What?" And then caught themselves. "That's fake," Rebecca said too quickly. "Edited." "Then maybe this will convince you," Alejandro said, and the next clip played, Victoria's call to her friend at the gossip site. "There's a housekeeper trying to seduce her rich boss." "Yes, Alejandro Montemayor." "Publish it. Just don't use my name." Phones stopped pretending to be discreet. Fingers flew. Screens caught everything. "Protecting me," Alejandro said mildly. "Let's see how far the protection goes." Regina's suggestion about theft played next, then Veronica's about child abuse, then Letitia's about destroying a reputation in a way that sounded less like strategy and more like malice. By the time the screens went dark, the room had slid not into chaos but into something worse for the guilty. Complete, measured judgment. "We did this for you," Rebecca said, but the sentence didn't belong to her anymore. "For me?" Alejandro asked. "The forgeries? The gossip? The way you taught my son that some people deserve to be publicly humiliated because of what they earn?" "The housekeeper was manipulating him," Regina tried. "What housekeeper?" Alejandro asked and gestured to the doorway. Maria stepped into view, not in a gown, not in anything that would make her unrecognizable to herself. Just clean lines, a simple dress borrowed from her own goodness, her chin lifted with the knowledge that sometimes survival has to arrive before dignity can. "This is Maria Gonzalez," Alejandro announced. "For 30 days, these 5 women tried to break her life, because of where she stands when she enters a room, because of what her day's work looks like, because my son smiled at her the way he used to smile at his mother." The room shifted. People looked at Maria as if their eyes had new instructions. "Why would they do that?" someone asked. "Because my 8-year-old preferred a woman who loved him to women who loved what loving him might get them," Alejandro said. "Because sometimes the smallest truth threatens the biggest performance." "That's ridiculous," Rebecca snapped, eyes flashing. "A child doesn't know what's best." "Diego," Alejandro called softly. "Come down." The boy's small footsteps echoed louder than they had any right to. He came straight to Maria without hesitation and took her hand. "During these 30 days," Alejandro said, kneeling to his son's height, "who took care of you best?" "Subordina." "Maria," Diego said, as if the question had been too easy. "Because she loves me for real. Because she makes me laugh when I want to cry. Because she makes the best cinnamon sandwiches on earth." It made people smile. It made the point. "What do you want, hijo?" Alejandro asked, but what he really asked was, "Do you trust me to follow you?" "I want Mari to stay forever," Diego said, "and I want those ladies to leave because they're mean." Once upon a time, Alejandro would have said there is a way to say that more gently. Today, he let the sentence be exactly what it needed to be. "Now you've seen their truth," he said to the room. "Let me tell you Maria's." He read from a file that didn't need to be printed on new paper to be real. References that warmed the room. Stories from people who had seen Maria long before the Montemeyers did. Parents who still had her phone number saved under Hero. Children who asked if she could come to their birthday even after she had moved on. A doctor who had offered her a raise because he didn't want her to leave. An elderly woman who was tended to as if she had been Maria's own grandmother. Maria cried quietly while she listened. The good kind of crying where tears exit the body with relief instead of with shame. I should have listened to my son from day one, Alejandro said, his voice a little rough now. Children don't lie about love. He turned to Maria, not knowing how to apologize in a way worthy of her, and decided to try anyway. I owe you an apology in front of everyone, he said, for doubting you, for believing noise, for not standing between you and cruelty faster. You don't have to, she began, instinctively protecting him even now. I do, he insisted. You walked into a sad house and brought back the sound of laughter. You guarded my son's heart when mine was too tired to. You made us a home when grief had made it a museum. Rebecca couldn't hold it any longer. This is absurd, she snapped to the room at large. You're all making a scene over an employee. Listen, Alejandro said softly, as if he were introducing a new word to people who thought they knew all of them already. For them, the phrase just an employee is an excuse to treat someone as lesser. Her job does not make her less. It's not about lesser, Regina tried again, voice wobbling. It's about compatibility. Compatibility? Claudia, Alejandro's sister, burst out from the crowd, her own shame for having believed gossip fueling the heat in her words. You humiliated an innocent woman because she makes her living honestly? People cursed under their breath. Someone said, shame, loudly enough to count. Phones captured, eyes judged, the way the internet had been built to do, and sometimes, once in a while, in the right direction. I think it's time you left, Alejandro said to the five in a tone he saved for impossible clients who mistook him for someone they could manage. Journalist microphones peered forward. Any comment? None, Victoria snapped, turning her face away. Regina shoved a camera with a flat palm. Veronica shook her head, on the edge of tears not born of remorse. Letitia mouthed sorry to no one in particular. Rebecca kept her chin high, as if the air above your head gets thinner and cleaner the higher you hold it. They left through a quiet that was worse than yelling. The door shut. The party exhaled. Alejandro turned back to the only two people in the room who mattered. He looked at his son and at the woman who had given him back a reason to make plans. When I started this, I thought I knew what made a good family, he said. I came up with a competition because it was something I could control. But love isn't a resume. It's what a little boy knows when he sees the person who always comes when he calls. He knelt. Diego, you spent 30 days with 5 women who wanted to be your mother. It's time to choose. The room forgot to breathe. Even the chandeliers seemed to lean closer. Diego swallowed and turned his face up to the man who had promised him something better was coming. None of them, he said. I want Mari. But Maria wasn't in the competition, Alejandro said, one last thread of theater woven in, just to make the truth land in a way it would stick. She's our employee. I don't care, Diego replied. She's the one who loves me. Sometimes a child's statement is the only verdict that matters. Maria sank to her knees so she could look Diego in the eyes. Mi amor, she whispered, your dad might not want. Si quiero, Alejandro said, surprising even himself with the way the words leaped out. He took Maria's hand, and the room went perfectly still. I want to choose you, too. How? She asked, lost and found at once. For 30 days, he said, I was supposed to look for a mother for Diego. I accidentally found the only person I want to be my wife. You're choosing a housekeeper? Someone whispered near the bar. Every person has their gasp radius. I'm choosing the woman, Alejandro said, voice full of something that had nothing to do with performance, who brought my home back to life. You don't have money yet, you are rich in what matters. You don't have a title, but you are wise without needing a school to prove it. You don't have status, but you have love. And love is the most expensive thing in the world, and somehow free when it's real. I'm just Maria tried. You are not just anything, he said, thumb catching a tear at the edge of her cheek. You are the woman I fell in love with. He pulled a small box from his pocket, something he'd let sit there all day like a lit match he wasn't ready to use. Maria Gonzalez, will you marry me? The room held its breath, as if sound might break it. Maria looked at the man in front of her, at the boy whose life she had watched unfold in crumbs and homework and cranes, at the room that had been a gallery of glances and was now a place where a new kind of sentence could live. Yes, she cried, yes. Applause rolled like a wave that didn't crash. It carried. People shouted blessings. Diego launched himself into both of them. Someone yelled, "Viva la familia!" And for once, a cliché felt like the truest sentence a person could say. Later, Alejandro explained in a voice that trembled where his composure used to be. He admitted to mistakes. He talked about grief, about the silence it leaves behind when it eats laughter and doesn't even pretend to be sorry. He told strangers how Maria had had the kindness to teach his son that hands could be steady again. He told them he had fallen in love with the way she didn't perform goodness. She simply did it, in the quiet, in the mess, with the patience of a person who believes children should never have to wonder if today is the day the person who loves them changes them into a chore. Claudia pressed forward, tearful and ashamed and relieved all at once. I judged you, she told Maria. I believed gossip. I'm sorry. Maria hugged her and said the one sentence that repairs things. Thank you. In the days that followed, the video circulated with a headline that finally aimed moral outrage in the right direction. Socialites fabricate lies to destroy Housekeeper. Millions watched a man with everything choose a woman the world told him to overlook. Comments landed like little flags planted for a better country. She's worth more than all 5 of them together. Money without character is just noise. A child knows the difference between performance and love. The 5 learned what reputations do when the internet stops clapping for you. Invitations withdrew. Contracts suffered. A law firm asked a partner to take unpaid leave. A clinic's calendar suddenly had holes where patients used to be. An influencer watched brands go quiet. An architect saw projects pause. Polite emails saying things about alignment and values, words you use when what you mean is, we saw the video. They met in a cafe, sunglasses on, voices low, sparing the world the spectacle of their regret. We overdid it, Regina said finally. We were cruel, Letitia admitted. The others nodded like women who had run into the wall they never thought would stand in their way. Meanwhile, the Montemayor mansion transformed in precisely the way that matters. Not in the shape of its walls, but in the shape of its mornings. The house that had felt like a museum became a home with the small, incurable music of laughter. Maria was no longer the help. She was the fiancée who left notes on the fridge in a handwriting that looked like carefulness itself. She was the voice that reminded Diego to bring his sweater. She was the promise at the top of the stairs at bedtime. They married in the garden 3 months later, under a sky that didn't feel the need to show off. Maria wore a dress that didn't cost much and somehow humbled the flowers. Diego walked ahead of them as if he knew he had accidentally become the person in the story who leads everyone else to the right place. Maria, do you take Alejandro? Asked a judge chosen for kindness rather than headlines. I do, she said, and meant a dozen more sentences when she said it. I do choose love over doubt. I do choose this family that didn't exist until we dared to call it one. I do choose to believe that the past doesn't get to decide the name of my future. And you, Diego, the judge added, a twinkle in his voice, because sometimes the heart of the law is the joy of breaking it exactly when you should. Do you accept Maria as your mom? I do, Diego shouted, and then, because he had learned what to do when joy couldn't be contained, he said it 2 more times. Everyone clapped. Everyone laughed. Everyone saw what it looks like when a child feels safe enough to be loud. They kissed. And the kiss wasn't a fairy tale, because fairy tales end where the work begins. It was a promise to show up for grocery lists and homework, for mornings after bad dreams and afternoons where someone breaks a glass and no one yells about it. 6 months later, Maria came to Alejandro with her hands on a different truth. You're going to be a father again, she said, a little startled at how joy can be a stranger who barges in without knocking. He lifted her because he didn't know how to thank a person for building him a second life without using his whole body to say it. They named the baby Sophia. When she arrived, tiny and astonishing in the way every baby makes a person briefly believe in miracles, Diego wouldn't leave her crib. "I was this small," he asked, astonished by the softness of his own beginning. "You were smaller," Maria smiled, and loud. "Mommy," he said without thinking, then repeated it because it still felt new enough to taste. "Mommy, thank you for coming to our family." "Thank you for choosing me," she answered, because sometimes children need to hear that adults know precisely who they are loving. Alejandro watched them and felt lucky in a way that makes you quiet. 2 years passed the way time does when you start keeping it in memories rather than schedules. In the garden on a Sunday afternoon, Diego chased Sofia through sun and shadow, their laughter a ribbon tying the day together. Alejandro glanced at Maria and asked a question that didn't need to be asked, but that people ask when they're grateful because gratitude makes you check that the miracle is still there. "Do you regret any of it?" he asked. "What?" she teased. "Taking a job cleaning the house of a man who would turn out to be the love of my life? Being judged by strangers who never bothered to know my name? Surviving humiliation to arrive right here?" Voicing, she looked toward the house, where sunlight came through the windows like a promise kept. "Not for a second," she said. "If I hadn't walked through all of that, I wouldn't have these two calling me mama. It was worth every tear." He kissed her with the kind of quiet that says thank you better than any speech. "Te amo," he whispered. "Te amo," she returned, then added the surname the world had once tried to tell her she shouldn't carry. "And I always will." People still whispered sometimes. People always whisper. But love doesn't ask permission from the loudest voices in the room. It simply goes about its work tying shoelaces, making snacks, picking up the phone after a bad day, telling the truth when lying would be easier. It dries tears in bathrooms. It lifts remotes in ballrooms. It learns to listen to small boys. It shows a man how to apologize. And if you're watching this, maybe you need to hear this. The person who loves you for real might not arrive the way a storybook says they will. They might come with a plain dress and rough hands and a willingness to kneel to pick up broken glass. They might make paper birds out of nothing. They might teach you that sometimes the most valuable thing in the room is the thing that costs the least. So if the world ever tells you to choose between glitter and gentleness, between a gift wrapped in a bow and a promise that shows up without being asked, what will you choose? Diego answered a long time ago. He chose the hand that wiped his tears. He chose right. And you knew that from the moment a glass shattered and a woman didn't complain about the blood on her own fingers. You knew it when he ran to the kitchen and the smell of cinnamon became the scent of safety. You knew it when 5 women said they loved the child and 1 woman proved she loved him by staying. You knew it when the music cut out and a man who had always known how to control a room finally remembered the only thing worth controlling is the shape of your own heart. If you ever forget, fold a paper crane. Remember what little hands know when big ones won't admit it yet. Remember that love is not a resume or a party or a title. It's a promise, easy to say, hard to keep, that says, I'm here for the mess and the miracle. It's a life built out of ordinary days and extraordinary gentleness, and it never, ever, ever has to ask which side of the room deserves the better seat.